Thanks, George. Now, on to our two very special guests. We're going to get political now. We have two guests to provide an opening address. Firstly, I would like to introduce Senator Mitch Fifield, the Shadow Minister for Disabilities, Carers and the Voluntary Sector. Thank you, Senator Fifield.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It's great to be here at the first National Youth Disability Conference. And could I acknowledge at the outset the tireless efforts of George to bring this to bear. Applause. Also, could I acknowledge Kate Colvin, the CEO of Youth Affairs Council, and my very good friend Andrea Coote, who is the State Parliamentary Secretary for Community Services. Andrea, if you haven't met her before, most of you probably have, but if you haven't met her before, she is the political equivalent of the Energizer Bunny. She is ceaseless and she's a great advocate for people with disability. I've been in this portfolio now for a little over 3 years, and I came to it without any background in disability. I didn't have a close friend who had a significant disability, didn't have a family member with a significant disability. So I came to the portfolio, I guess you could say, blissfully ignorant. That I'd been operating on the assumption that I think a lot of people do, that people in Australia with a disability got the support that they need. Usually there's laughter when I say that, because people who have a disability or a family member or work with someone with a disability obviously know that that is not the case. And so the scales literally fell from my eyes when I realised that we live in a country where often the level of support that a person with a disability receives is sometimes close to third world standard. That there's rationing, there are waiting lists, it's a crisis-driven system too often, and it's not the way that it should be in what is a first world country, what is a wealthy country. Australians assume that they pay their taxes, and people who face extra challenges for reasons beyond their control get the support that they need. And we know that's not true. There have been some great developments over the last couple of years where people with disability, carers, family members have come together to speak with one voice to say, it's not good enough and we're not going to take it anymore. And all political parties have heard that message. And you cannot find a member of the state parliament or a member of the federal parliament in government or opposition today who will say anything other than, we want an NDIS, its time has come, and the sooner the better. And that's a great thing. But it's not a tribute, I have to say, to our politicians. It's a tribute to people with disability and their family and friends for being ceaseless, for not giving up, for demanding that their voice is heard, and it has been heard. You will have been aware, obviously, of that great work that the Productivity Commission did in laying out the blueprint for a national disability insurance scheme. You would be aware that the current federal government have announced $1 billion for the first phase of the NDIS, which the federal opposition fully supports. And you'll be aware that a number of state governments, led by Victoria, have committed to establish launch sites for the NDIS. And again, the federal opposition fully supports that. But we also have a job to do as a federal opposition to ask questions on your behalf of the government of the day to make sure that the National Disability Insurance Scheme is the best that it can be. Not to put questions in a partisan and political point-scoring way, because no one wants that in disability, but to put questions in a way that will see the NDIS be the best that it can be. And one thing that the federal opposition has proposed as a mechanism to do that is the idea of a joint parliamentary committee chaired by both sides of politics to oversee the implementation of the NDIS. I think we need a mechanism that can ensure that the NDIS is elevated beyond partisanship. And I think this joint parliamentary committee chaired by both sides of politics would do that. We also need a forum where questions can be asked about the design, implementation and funding of the NDIS in a way that isn't seen to be partisan. I mean, you all know the way things go in politics. If an opposition asks a question about something the government's doing, it tends to be seen that you're trying to score a political point. It's just the way that the press cover things. It's the way of adversarial politics. And that's why I think we need a new model to oversight the implementation of the NDIS, so that if there are young people with a disability who have a question about eligibility, which they're concerned isn't being addressed in the design of the NDIS, they can come to a Member of Parliament, and that Member of Parliament can put that question in this joint parliamentary oversight committee and get an answer. And that in posing that question, it's not seen as undermining what's being done, it's actually seen as supporting what's being done. So that's a proposition that we have put to the government. Unfortunately, the government to date have said no, but we will persist because the NDIS is just too important to allow it to be mired in the day-to-day politics which we too often see. Can I commend everyone here today and the organisations represented for the great advocacy work that you do, for the work that you do in systemic advocacy and for the work that you do in individual advocacy. And I've got to tell you, under an NDIS, advocacy is going to have to come into its own. Because where you have more individuals than ever before accessing the supports that they need, you are going to need individual advocacy more than ever before to make sure that the voices of individuals are heard, that we don't have a new bureaucracy that's unresponsive, that doesn't listen. So individual advocacy will come into its own in a way that we have never seen before. But we will also need a new commitment to systemic advocacy, because when you have a big, large, new national organisation, which we all want to see in the form of the NDIS, we all know that when you've got big, large national organisations, the voice of individuals needs to be heard about the systemic issues that are so important to make sure that we don't repeat mistakes of the past. So again, individual advocacy, systemic advocacy, there will need to be a new commitment to it. The Productivity Commission didn't have a heck of a lot to say about either form of advocacy, but it's probably a fair bet that that sort of advocacy will be funded separately to an NDIS. It is very heartening for me as someone who hopes one day to be the Minister for this area, to see the commitment and enthusiasm that there is in this room. I think one of the problems that we've faced in disability is that there hasn't been a continuity in terms of the holders of the disability portfolio in opposition in government. No sooner does the sector train up the person who has the front bench portfolio of disabilities, but they move on to a different portfolio, and so they've got to be trained up again. I did have this portfolio before the last election, and after it, I asked Tony Abbott for two things. I said that I thought that the portfolio needed to be upgraded from a parliamentary secretary's position, which it was at that stage, to a full ministerial rank position. which he did. And the other thing that I said to Tony is that I wanted to stay in the portfolio, that hopefully what I had learnt I could put to good use, and we wouldn't see the need to train up someone else on the front bench from our side of politics. And that's what I hope, is that I can stay in this portfolio so that we can see a better deal delivered for people with disability. It's been a long time coming. I can't think of another area of government policy in greater need of change, and it would be my great honour and privilege to have the opportunity to be part of helping deliver the better deal that is needed. So thank you so much. Have a great 2 days, and it's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you, Senator Fifield. And yeah, I think we all share the desire for people with disabilities to achieve their position above all the bipartisan politics, where I think, you know, all of us deserve to be, and this issue deserves to be. So it's very, very exciting to be hearing that both sides of politics are trying really hard to work on that. And as George has just pointed out, I'm really glad to hear that advocacy is an up and growing field, because that means he can keep me on at White-ass. Now, I'd like to introduce our second guest speaker, the Honourable Andrea Coote, Parliamentary Secretary for Family and Community Services. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Jen. And I too would like to congratulate George. He looks pretty well on it for not sleeping since August. So I guess the end of the week, next weekend will be a long sleep. And I do really want to congratulate you, George, for a really successful conference. I've looked at the program. The program just looks so exciting, and there's over 150 participants, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the outcomes of what it is that you deliberate on, and to take that forward where possible. But to my friend Mitch Fifield, as you can see, he is totally dedicated to this portfolio, to this area, and believe me, he is one of the talented politicians in the opposition party, and watch this space. He will be taking disability right up at a national level to Tony Abbott and beyond. So I think we're really lucky to have such a terrific advocate. To Kate Colvin, I can't see her, but hello to, oh, hi Kate, to say hello to Kate. To Jen for a terrific introduction there from you. And to everybody here. It is so exciting to be here at the very first. Now, I was a little nonplussed to think that the space scientists have had 60. We're all going to be very ancient by the time, or I will be, by the time you come up with 60. So I think we'll have to have a couple a year. I think we'll have to accelerate this and get things going really quickly. I've been in this particular room on many occasions with young people. And just like you, they have issues on education, on sexuality, on homelessness, and on the fact that the adults in their lives don't appreciate and understand their abilities to be responsible for themselves. So it is really important. It's been electric. It's been tangible to listen to these young people in this room talking and arguing and fossing out all of the ideas that are relevant to them. And I know, looking at your program, that that's precisely what is going to be here done in this room over the next 2 days. And as I said, I'll be very keen to see and to read what the outcomes are. Now, Mitch spoke at length about the NDIS, and I'm certain that you are all just as excited as we are, but also just as perplexed in many respects. The launch site has been chosen by the Victorian Government to be in the Barwon, Colac, Otway area, and we are now gearing up for what is going to be the proper launch and the way forward. Service providers are getting organised, individuals are getting organised, bureaucrats are getting organised, but the really important thing is for you to have a voice. Make certain that you're participants. Make certain that young people's voices are heard. Make quite certain that you are a very relevant, ongoing part of the NDIS process. Today and tomorrow are going to give you some focus on what you can do, but I really sincerely encourage you all, because quite frankly, you are our future. You are going to be at the coalface of what an NDIS does into the future. So your voices need to be heard very loudly. So get engaged, make quite certain that you're there at the table, and be heard. It is really important that you are participants in it. We have to make this a success. As Mitch rightly said, we are all wanting this to work for everyone. But it's only going to be as good as we can make it, and we've all got to be eager participants in that process. Many of you in here know that I helped to develop the State Disability Plan, and we developed a State Disability Plan building on the success of the first one, and there were two elements of the State Disability Plan that were seen to be lacking. One was accountability and evaluation. People wanted an opportunity to say what was and what was not working in a State Disability Plan, and the second one was how government departments join up. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 100 times. People are sick to death of dealing and telling their story to 5 different government departments. So one of the things that we have tried to do in the State Disability Plan is to join up a whole range of government departments: health, transport, education, community services, housing, and others as well, to make quite certain that we can deliver the very best programs for people with a disability, so that in fact you are supported at every level. The fact that you can actually catch a train to work, the fact that the Department of Transport has a job for you, that they have facilities there that welcome you, these are just some of the examples. Now, George was at a couple of those forums and literally had me on toast, as he normally does, and gave me some very positive feedback. We've listened right across the state to what you had to say. We were developing the State Disability Plan, in a sense, blindly, because at that stage we're not really certain of how an NDIS was going to work. So the idea to have evaluation and monitoring, and for you to have input as an ongoing part of the procedure, is going to be very welcome from our point of view. So it shows that even into the future where we intend to go in this state. Education and employment were things that came back to us all the time in our consultations across the state. There had been there'd been disability action plans, and some of you in this room will have heard of these. Each government department was supposed to have a DAP, another acronym, and yes, the government departments had them. They could tick the box, but it didn't actually translate into reality. So we've done an audit of the DAPs to see what is actually out there, what is happening, and it won't be any surprise to any of you to learn that we have a long way to go. But by working in a joined-up approach and seeing what we can do across all departments, hopefully those opportunities for work into the future are going to be something that all of you can embrace. We recently started a pilot at the Department of Human Services and Community Services, where we employed people with a disability who were referred to us from the disability liaison offices at the university. They were cadetships and they were so successful. They were not just successful for the participants, but they were really successful for the people they were working with. So have a look and see what is out there. Give us your feedback. We need to hear. And I'll be very particularly interested in what it is that you have to say in the deliberations in the next 2 days. You are our future. You're the ones that are going to be making an NDIS in this country work. You're going to be the ones that hold us as governments and governments to come to account. It's conferences such as today that are going to make their mark. Governments will sit up and listen. People in positions of responsibility will get up and listen. Use your voices, use them loudly, and keep us to account. Have a fabulous conference. Thank you.